Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ken Coleman, and welcome to our Merchant Spring and Sendle Masterclass webinar. My name is Ken Coleman. I'm going to be your host for today to keep everyone in line and to get as much information out of our brains and into yours so that you can sell and grow both locally and globally on Amazon and other marketplaces. In this episode, we will be focusing on proven sales tactics to get the absolute most out of Amazon's biggest event of the year, which is Amazon Prime Day, and it is in less than 10 days now, on the 14th and 15th. We are always happy to partner with our good friends over at Sendle. Once we'd seen the volume of registrations and questions from professional sellers on this topic, they've said, hey guys, why don't you take all of the time to help these sellers make the most of that event? So while they're going to be listening closely, and they'll always be happy to take your questions on driving a great post-purchase customer experience, we're going to be focusing all of our time today on setting up and optimizing your stores within Amazon itself. A couple of housekeeping, a little bit of housekeeping going on here. There's going to be a lot of information inside all of the slides. If you've seen any of our masterclasses before, they're jam-packed with proven tips to do that. So we will send you the slides. You'll also get a copy within those slides of the recording itself. So you can watch and replay. So really just absorb all of the information that we get, and you can always follow up with us either in chat live. We've got Paul and Eric manning our chat window right now, or we'll give you an email address after the fact, and we're always happy to help you make the most of the event. So with that said, why don't we meet our episode expert? Today, again, we're very happy to welcome back James, our COO of Merchant Spring and the co-founder. He has been part of umpteen Prime Days across Amazon, but what's most impressive about his team and what his skills is he actually trains up professional sellers to get even more sales out of Amazon, and he gets them up to say how are they going to optimize all of their brands, even for sellers that have have years of experience against that, years of experience selling on Amazon. So rather than hear me talk, this is my first Prime Day. I'm excited to hear what James has to share. There's going to be plenty of time for Q&A at the end. So if you do have any questions, just reach out to Eric and send them through. But without further ado, let me hand over to James. James, are you there?
Thank you, Ken, and thank you everyone for joining us for another Mastering Marketplaces Sales Tactics session. I'm really excited to be walking you guys through this. So to start off with, the theme of this session is Amazon Prime Day. So what is Amazon Prime Day? It's essentially a 2-day event that's happening this year on the 13th and 14th of October. And essentially what it is it's an event that is geared towards providing deals and promotions and discounts specifically to Amazon Prime members, right? So you will see, Amazon invests a lot in this because it's one of the biggest, well, if not the biggest day in their calendar year. Now, why is it so important? Obviously, it's really important on Amazon because it's the biggest sales day of the year, but it does have an on-flow effect. And as we can see, last year, actually, both eBay and Catch had a massive traffic uplift prior to, during, and after Prime Day. So, this is something that you need to be aware of as a seller, that actually all of your channels probably require similar preparation as to what you need to do for Amazon to make the most out of it. We're also expecting that this year, all the channels will have a similar uplift before, during, and after. So it's definitely something you need to keep on your radar. So Prime Day as a seller, what does that really mean? As you can see on screen here, last year, one of our small clients used Prime Day to take their Amazon trading to the next level. They were doing like roughly 9 orders a day on average. But during Prime Day, they were able to get a 610% uplift, and it's just by ticking some pretty basic boxes. So, those being just optimizing listings, having just a simple advertising campaign running, joining every single lightning deal that Amazon offers you, and just putting stock in FBA just well and truly before Prime Day, and just doing those basics, nothing fancy, they were able to get 610% uplift. And the trailing benefits of this has enabled them to be the #1 product in their category still to this day. So tactics for success on Amazon Prime Day. With most of you having probably a lot of products on Amazon, I wouldn't suggest going all out, and we see you don't have enough time to invest in every single product. But, start by picking your 10 to 20, top products. And then from there, follow the 4 steps of having best-in-class ASIN content, having enough inventory allocated and planned accordingly. Spend some time on sponsored advertising and have a sound pricing and BuyBox strategy. So what is best-in-class ASIN content? Well, I think we should start with why is it important? From what we see, products that have the best-in-class content generally have much higher sales and rank than other ASINs. It allows the seller to capitalize on deal hunting behavior because, you are ranked ahead, you're more easily discoverable. And then when they do get to the page, the content is so good that they've got every reason to click buy, right? Statistically, we see a strong link between content quality and search ranking conversion rate. This is basic stuff, but you'd be surprised how many people don't realize how important it is. So what does that mean on Amazon? Best-in-class ASIN content means, using all of the available image spots, at least having 8 images, multiple angles, answer as many questions as you can, having a really nicely optimized title, and then, using all the bullet points on Amazon. But it's also about completing the product attributes, and also making sure the search terms and other data points are filled out in the back end. A lot of people miss that, but it's really, really important. Now, taking it to another level, you've got the Amazon A+ page. So Amazon A+ is available to those who've registered in brand registry. It effectively allows the seller to create more enriched product descriptions. So in this case, this is our client here. It's a mix of, images, text boxes, banners, logos, icons, etc. But essentially, it's something you can do. You have unique A+ pages for each ASIN, but if you're going to start out and whip something together, maybe start out by creating one A+ template you can apply to multiple ASINs just to keep things simple to start with. But we see statistically products that have A+ pages like this, they rank better, they convert better, and that's all that really matters. So point 2, inventory allocation. Why is this important? Look, I think it's a basic. You got to have inventory to actually make sales, right? But low to no inventory on Amazon puts your product rank at risk, and that is that could be the death of your sales traction that you've built up. High levels of inventory availability in FBA is a requirement for lightning deals. So when Amazon offers you a deal and says, "Do you want to be featured or participate in the lightning deal?" you need to have there's actually it says minimum 15 quantity or minimum 30 quantity or whatever. You need stock to maintain ongoing sales traction. And if you have no sales traction, that means you're not getting reviews. And reviews are so key on Amazon to maintaining, that rank. You'll see if you go onto Amazon in the US, you'll see products with the hundreds of thousands of levels of reviews. And that's how they maintain a very high level of positioning. Understanding your stock level position on Amazon allows you to replenish more strategically. It means you're not sending stock for an ASIN that's doesn't really sell. It allows you to, being very close to the inventory level, allows you to go, okay, I'm sending stock for this, and that's where I'm going to make my money. The benefits of doing all this is really maintain your ASIN rank and visibility. You always qualify for lightning deals, and you always, you got your foot to the floor in terms of maintaining sales and review momentum. So how do you do that? Well, you can go into Amazon Seller Central, you can draw down a report or whatever, but you can also use our tool, Marketplace Manager. It's got a filter there that goes, I want to see everything that's at risk of out of stock. So just basically identify your out of stocks and then replenish the inventory. As simple as that. Now, sponsored advertising. Why is this important? Well, you can buy visibility in Amazon, right? It allows you to sit way above even the search results, and allows you to capture additional eyeballs from Prime Day and increase traffic on high converted keywords. So that might sound a little bit convoluted, but what we're really saying here is with the module, the advertising module inside Amazon, it allows you to be really, really focused on a Prime Day. So I'm just going to jump into the how. So how do you make the most of Amazon marketing as a beginner on Prime Day? You should go into your Amazon advertising module and look at the keyword performance and ASIN performance. What I'm saying is, like, you might see in your advertising campaign that's currently active, if you have an automatic one going, you might see a selection of keywords that convert really, really, really well. And that's great because, coming up to Prime Day, you might be able to, that'll enable you to set up a very narrow focused, manually targeted campaign, which focuses on the keywords that actually convert, right? So that means you're not kind of getting more data points around what keywords convert, but it allows you to focus and allows you to spend where you actually make money. So, that brings me to the next step, which is reduce the spend on broad match campaigns during Prime Day and just focus on the words that actually convert. We'd also suggest, increasing the top of search bid multiplier. So there is a part of the Amazon advertising module that lets you increase your bids for the top of search position. Top of search is a really, really high performing placement. So definitely think about that. Depending on what market you're in, you may actually be able to, rather than target on keywords, you can target your advertising based on another ASIN or a competitor ASIN or whatever. So, maybe it's the time to experiment. Substitute targeting of Prime deals for, maybe target an ASIN. So, yeah, it's a good time to experiment, but it's also a good time to really focus in and kind of like really, spend big and focus in on your advertising, because it's probably the one day where you can get a lot of uplift from that. Pricing and buy box strategy. So why is this important? I mean, it's always important to win the buy box, but you need to think about I guess the risk of losing the sale to a competitor. If you've gone through all the effort of optimizing the content, putting in advertising, thinking about advertising, even just time thinking about Prime Day, you've put in all the effort. Like, you need to have a pricing or buy box strategy to ensure that you always win the buy box, and therefore you always get the sale, right? And you need to be aware of the buy box. It's a thing where there's dynamic seller behavior going on. The sellers will change price, maybe even drop price on Prime Day. So you need to be really, really on top of it, right? So how do you actually manage the buy box or your pricing on Prime Day? Well, again, you can use Amazon, but you can also use our tool, which gives you a very, very quick view of, why am I losing the buy box? How many products are losing the buy box? Who am I losing to? Am I losing to Amazon? So it enables you to have the data at your fingertips to pick the buy boxes that you can actually win and still make margin, right? So what we suggest on Prime Day is monitor your position intraday throughout the day. Understand the nature of the competition, like who you're losing to. You're losing to Amazon, maybe it's not really worth it. Or if you don't have much stock, maybe, again, it's not really worth trying to win the buy box. But yeah, be aware of it, because there will be opportunities where you can lower or increase the price to influence your position on the buy box. Pro tip there, avoid direct competition with Amazon. It'll pretty much be a race to the bottom. So lastly, don't forget, in preparation for this, really go for soliciting positive reviews. I think if anything coming out of Prime Day, it's an opportunity to get sales, but it's an opportunity to get a lot of reviews, right? And reviews will allow you to have a long-term benefit out of Prime Day, because as I explained before, reviews really drive your ranking, your constant ranking. So, and then which is correlated to sales traction. Plan to capture the halo effect across other channels. So, as I showed on the first slide, actually Catch, eBay, and I suspect others like Kogan and MyDeal will also have very high traffic on this day. So as we know, buyers typically, if they go to eBay, they might go to Amazon or cross-check pricing, for example. So make sure your offer, if you're on multiple marketplaces, make sure your deals are kind of replicated across the same channels, so that if a buyer does go elsewhere, at least they will still buy, right? Make sure your inventory is in check, and please optimize your listings before Prime Day. Really, really important. I think, there's some really simple things that you can do, and because they're simple, I recommend you doing all of these things before Prime Day. So that's it from me. I'm going to now hand back to Ken, who's going to take you through the Q&A.
James, wow. And this is my first Prime Day, so certainly a lot of information in there that was very interesting, particularly around that kind of 6x improvement in sales. One thing, guys, this is your opportunity. If you have any questions, send them to Eric Winkler in chat or either directly to me. We did have some pre-submitted when folks filled out the form, so I might start off with one of those. James, the first one is really, there was a bit of movement due to COVID and other things around the Prime Day, around the Prime Day scheduling. Do you think that's actually going to have an impact on the success of the day, or how do you see that kind of playing out?
Yeah, Ken. So you can hear me, right?
Yeah, we can.
Cool. So no, I don't think it'll have much of an effect. In fact, I think it's probably built up a lot of hype. There was a lot of rumors going around about when's Prime Day going to happen, and a lot of people are thinking about it. I also think that having it much closer to Black Friday, Cyber Monday kind of helps, because everyone's already, like, from a consumer perspective, is already thinking in this deal hunting mentality.
Yeah.
I also think that kind of the lockdown situation in Australia certainly has, driven a lot of people online. So I think there's some behaviours people have adopted recently, which certainly could contribute to an even more successful Prime Day.
Right. One of the thanks for that. There's one I didn't see who that came in from, but there's a question live of how do you suggest that sellers pick which of their top 10 to 20 products are best? Do you have like a methodology that you go through? It's like these ones are going to kill it.
Yeah, look, there's you could use a number of different methodologies, but really I think it's best to look at it as where are your biggest opportunities or low-hanging fruits. Now that's obviously different for different types of sellers. Especially those selling their own brand where there's little to no competition in terms of the actual ASIN. And then it's different again for those who are selling, other branded products where there's competition at an ASIN level. Yeah. So I think, put simply again, it's where the opportunities lie. So I think at a brand seller level, like if you're selling your own stuff, it's good to start with the traffic, right? Like perhaps, start with stuff that has certainly like good conversion, but not many impressions. Like that would be an opportunity to just, apply a lot of advertising to it during the Prime Day. Just to capitalize on the statistical, mathematics side where statistically it'll convert. I think if you're selling branded items, whether you've got, BuyBox competitiveness, I think it's important to pick products where you can win the BuyBox as a starting point. Obviously you want to win the BuyBox to actually get sales, but also, just think about, I guess where you have inventory as well. And I guess economics to fund advertising on that ASIN. So it's like a three-pronged approach. Can you win the BuyBox? Can you afford advertising? And do you have enough stock to see you through like a 72-hour period? So that's kind of how I'd pick it.
Okay. And would you, when you're doing those kind of forecasts, would you be expecting that enough inventory kind of says that it needs to be 4 to 6 times of what you'd normally spend within a day? Or where would you kind of, I know it'll be different by sellers, but do you have a rule of thumb?
Yeah. I mean, look, based on that client example, right, it's a 6 times uplift. But I think, if you as a seller are already kind of in let's say the lightning deals on Prime Day, you probably have met that prerequisite hurdle where it's like 30, 40, 50 levels of inventory for one particular ASIN, right? So yeah. The answer is yes. And if you're already kind of prepped in a way, then you're probably halfway there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. A question from Mohammed. He's saying that this is his first Prime Day, right? And he wants to know what are the kind of mistakes that he could learn from or just not make? Like how does he keep his nerve during this day?
Well, I think it's if we assume that Mohammed is selling other people's products, like I guess competing at an ASIN level.
Yeah.
I think keeping sanity. Let's say he's ticked all the boxes, got inventory, he's been on Amazon for a little bit, so he kind of knows what he's doing. But I guess it's about monitoring that buy box really. You just don't want to get knocked out by someone who's just gone on gung ho and price drop their way to the top, because some people look at PrimeDay as a non-profit exercise, and I don't think that's for everyone, but certainly some sellers in more mature markets just say, look, I'm just going to get all of this conversion, I'm going to get all of this, I'm going to get reviews, I'm going to get this, that, and the other, and they see that as the main value point out of PrimeDay, as opposed to driving revenue and profitability, so to speak. So you just got to be careful of that one.
Good. And I guess staying across your metrics to see, can you actually afford it too, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. What else do we have? I'll just do another call out for questions before I go to the ones that were pre-submitted. So a lot of the tactics that you had in there, you touched on intraday on PrimeDay itself, where you'll be optimizing the BuyBox and maybe using either Seller Central or the Marketplace Manager tool to do that. Are there other things which you should be doing on the day itself, given that a lot of the preparatory elements are in place ahead of time? And is there even still time to get into the FBA warehouses? Of course, there's always time to optimize listings.
Yeah, look, I think starting with your last point, is there still time to get into FBA? The answer is yes. In fact, we had a client whose stock arrived at one of the Sydney FBA houses yesterday. But will it get scanned in the usual 24 to 48 hours? Probably not. So it's kind of really on the edge there. Other things that you should be monitoring as a seller, probably your account health. Look, I just, if you are someone that's probably going to get a crazy level of sales, like if you have pretty good traction right now, you will probably get a lot more sales. So as a result, you just got to defend that seller metric. And what I mean by that is answering queries, making sure your stuff goes out on time, or if early, if you're selling on, fulfilled by merchant. I know some of the guys on the call probably are selling both FBA and FBM. So it's just, really keep an eye on that, because increased volume, like there's obviously got the absolute number of issues that could occur will increase too.
There's another question submitted actually by, his name is James as well. James, you should say hello. He was asking around, what's the kind of broader halo effect on other e-commerce sites? Would you expect there to be an uplift there as well? Like,
yeah,
what your experience tell you?
Yeah, looking at last year, looking at something like Catch, even 2 weeks beforehand had, I can't remember the number, but it was a massive uplift in traffic. Also from our portfolio perspective, we noticed a massive uplift in actual sales as well. Same actually goes on the day prior, on Prime Days, those 2 days, and the day after. I think the nature of from what we can see with like our audience overlap insights, like we can see that people definitely cross-check other marketplaces and even, actual brands' websites. So, it's definitely something we would expect to see across the board in terms of uplift of traffic and sales, because just people are behind the computer or on their phone anyway, right? So
yeah. Okay, guys, we might have time for one more question. We'll give that a minute. And if not, then we'll move on and wrap things up. James, what are the kind of things that you prime and get your team of sellers ready? What's your pep talk to new sellers? It's like, okay, guys, get your head in the game for this. How are you? Because you've seen lots of things on, lots of people overpromise that they're going to become millionaires on Amazon, and that this is how you're going to do it. What's your pep talk to kind of get your head in the right space to sell and trade?
Yeah, well, it's funny you asked that. The pep talk really happens probably a month ago. Because back then you're thinking about, okay, there's already lightning deal offers in your Seller Central. How do you, I want to accept those. And then as a result of that, you're thinking about sending stock into Amazon FBA, right? So that's happening like a month ago. Then, you're thinking, well, I want a successful advertising campaign during Prime Day. So, early on, probably a month or even a month and a bit prior, because we had rumors that, Prime Day was going to be in October, like months and months ago. So some of it is about, trawling keyword success through automatic advertising campaigns really early, so you can kind of gather an idea of what people are searching for and what keywords are converting and so on. So that's kind of like the pre pep talk, if that makes sense.
It's funny. I think there's one of our sellers who's on the call who just asked, what type of Amazon advertising do you believe actually works best? I guess particularly during Prime Day. Is there particular inventory or tactics which you'd be suggesting focusing on?
Yes, I mean, look, I could talk about this for hours, but without going into too much detail and keeping it really, really simple.
Yeah.
If you own a brand and you have brand registry, the top of search placement, which I think you had in one of the slides, Ken, is actually the highest performing, highest converting piece of Amazon advertising, that you can get right now, because you kind of got that whole advertising bar where you got like a logo and 3 or 4 little products that you want to merchandise, and you can target it based on specific keywords, which if you've prepared for this, you probably know which keywords convert, right? So that, if you have own a brand, that is probably the best thing to do. And then thinking about having a bid multiplier applied to that, so you always dominate that position. I think if you don't own a brand, well then it's still top of search, but it's just like the product search. Obviously you can't have that branded search advertising bar, but it's still any sort of advertising I think is worth investing in at this point, like especially because Australia is so new. It's not as competitive or as expensive as other markets.
Of course. James, I think we're just coming on up to time. So all that's really left for us to do is to kind of thank you for your time and for imparting that knowledge onto us. If we take a look at what I'm going to say to the rest of our audience, there are still a couple more questions coming on in. We're always happy to answer it, and I'm always happy to book James in for personal one-to-one calls, James. I'm sure you don't mind that, do you, James?
Fine, Ken.
You make time for me. I like that. That's fine. But if you do have any questions, you can jump on the site and start a chat, or send an email or a question through to grow@merchantspring.io. Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you very much, Paul and Eric, for manning chat. Thank you to all our sellers for joining us live. We particularly love this live engagement. We will have future masterclasses coming on up with dates to be announced that allow you that will probably be focusing on how you sell across multiple marketplaces leading into our Christmas period and into our sales. If you do have any feedback on how we've done or things that you'd like to see in our next session, then please again send that through to us. So all that's left is to thank you very much, suggest you guys, we all try and stay safe and look after each other. See you now. Bye.
Thanks, Ken.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.